I'm from Connecticut. I was in a long-distance relationship with a girl from Georgia, and would often make road trips down to visit her. I don't really mind. I love road trips. I've driven across the United States and back, all on my own. There's just something about traveling the highways of the U.S. by yourself that's just so freeing. To save money, I would sleep in my car. It's not so bad. It's basically camping, in a metal tent. Makes you feel like you're really roughing it. I just recline the seat back, keep the key in the ignition just in case, and doze off. No, I don't put anything up to block the windows for privacy. Maybe I should have. The trip down south is a comfortable 2-day drive. My stop would usually be somewhere along the Virginia-North Carolina border. So for my previous trip, that's exactly where I stopped that night. Rest stops were often less trafficked, and thus quieter than truck stops. Normally I would have stopped at a Love's, but I was so tired that I settled for the first rest stop that I saw. It was oddly vacant that night, with only a couple lone cars sitting forlorn under the amber street lamps. Most likely travelers with the same idea as me. I pulled into a parking spot away from the others, under the shadow of a tree and far from the street lamps. I figured I would have more privacy there, as opposed to being bathed in light. So I did my usual thing, locked my doors, opened the window just a hair for ventilation, kept my key in, reclined the seat, and went to sleep. I was never interrupted on any of these car camping nights, so I never suspected anything on this one. Then a sharp tap woke me up. At first, I thought I had heard it in my dream. I opened my eyes, a bit confused. Since I was leaned back, I was facing the ceiling and couldn't see anything. I hear another tap, like a tiny object hitting a hard surface. It came in an irregular rhythm. Was it raining? Was water dripping onto my windshield? I'm under a tree. Maybe something fell from the branches. Maybe a squirrel or a bird was dropping something. What if a squirrel was climbing around my car? Or what if it wasn't an animal? The thought occurred to me that it might very well be a person poking around outside. What did they want? Were the doors locked? Yes. The keys were in the ignition. I can leave in an instant. Still, I lay there, completely still, pretending to be asleep, pretending I hadn't heard anything, hoping whoever it was, they would leave me alone. It was better to not find out. I was too afraid to find out. It was better to stay here in blissful ignorance. Still, the tapping continued. I had to do something. There was no way I was just going to stay there. I had to look. My heart was pounding. In that moment, it was deafeningly loud. Whoever was out there could probably hear it. I decided I was going to look. I was going to raise my head up and see what was making the noise. So that's what I did. What met my eyes sent a jolt through my entire body. Every muscle fiber locked up in pure shock at what I saw. The faint glow of the street lamps cast just enough light for me to make out what I was looking at. There, in the windshield, staring directly at me, was a face. Someone I presumed to be a woman was lying on my hood, with her face pressed right up against my windshield. Her face was completely still, locked in a permanent grin. I froze in overwhelming fear. The eyes I stared into appeared to have rolled back, showing only the whites. The nose was turned up, pressing painfully into the glass. The lips stretched wide, revealing horrid rotten teeth. Even in the darkness, I could tell her skin was sickly pale, contrasting her long, filthy black hair. Whoever this was, she was clearly not in her right mind. I don't know how long I sat there, too afraid to move. Finally, I got a grip on myself and shot my hand to the ignition. It turned over, making it, in that instant, the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. For a split second, I was afraid I might be caught in the horror movie scene, the one where the car won't crank as the killer approaches. I reversed as fast as I could, trying not to give this creeper any time to try anything. In my panic, I remember activating the windshield wipers in a futile attempt to get her off. I thought, was I about to drive out of here with some wacko holding onto my hood? Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about it, because as soon as I stopped, the woman leapt off, landing on all fours. Seeing my opportunity, I shifted into drive and gunned it, right as I saw her reaching for the driver's side door. With my foot on the gas, I sped out of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard her let out a piercing shriek, like that of an animal. I looked into my rearview mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw her chasing me, running on all fours, her black hair swinging wildly around her. I couldn't get a good look, as I rounded a curve in the road leading out of the rest stop and merged with the highway. There, I picked up speed and drove through the night. I did not dare stop again until I saw the morning light. Have you ever felt a fear so extreme it almost felt primal? I'm not talking about the fear you feel when your bills are past due, or the fear you feel when you finally step up to your childhood bully. I'm talking about the hanging off a rock cliff with a completely exhausted grip. Life or death fear, so extreme that it becomes an out-of-body experience. If you have experienced a truly traumatizing event, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, then allow me to explain. This all happened about 10 years ago. I was fresh out of high school, full of testosterone, and had no idea where I was going in life. This led to an excessive amount of partying. I did not care if I had to show up alone to a party where I only knew one person. If I caught wind of it, I was there. I was driving home from one of these alcohol-infested parties that I so often partook in. Before you stop reading this and report me to the police, I did not drink on this particular night. This was one of those parties where I only knew a single person and got quickly kicked out. It was late. I don't remember exactly how late. I just know that it was well past midnight. To add a little more context to the story, I live in the North Georgia mountains right near the start of the Appalachian Trail. It's riddled with steep, windy back roads. It's not often you see cars out past 10 p.m. where I live. Anyways, I was driving home when I looked down and realized I'm about to run out of gas. This party was about 30 minutes away from where I lived, and I had maybe been driving for 10 minutes at this point. I decided to try my luck and see if I could make it home without stopping. Shortly after coming to this decision, I noticed a car quickly advancing on me. It felt like they covered a distance of 100 yards in a matter of a few seconds, and before I knew it, they were right on my bumper. As they got close, I could also hear the mixture of a loud exhaust and death metal disturbing the still night around us. From the moment they got behind my bumper, I knew something was terribly wrong. Aside from the sound, even the way they drove was intimidating, almost mimicking every micro-turn I made with perfection, all while staying within 5 feet of my bumper. Luckily for me, I was spoiled enough to be driving a Mustang GT right out of high school, and felt confident in my ability to drive it. So I figure I'll just outrun this guy and beat him to my house where my family is strapped to the teeth with weapons. But I couldn't outrun him. No matter how hard I stomped on it, or how recklessly I took a corner, he stayed pinned behind me. And then the terrible realization dawned upon me. I had practically an empty gas tank. There was no way I'd be able to make it home now with how aggressively I'd been driving. Plus, it was pointless to attempt to make it to my house at the rate of which he was keeping up with me. I'd only be putting my loved ones in danger. So, purely out of my fear-driven instincts, I improvised. I was close enough to home at this point to know the surrounding area well. This chase had been going for about 5 to 10 minutes. It felt like an hour. A neighborhood that is easy to miss if you aren't aware of its existence was only like 2 miles away. So I slowed down to nearly the point of stopping, forcing him to do the same. Then I punched it. I hit the first turn so hard I nearly went off the road and into the trees. But somehow, I managed to save it. I slammed into the right turn, nearly wrecking again, and gunned straight for the pool parking lot of this neighborhood. I had about 8 seconds of separation at this point, and just kind of prayed that the overgrown landscape around the pool area would hide my car from the pursuers. They must have seen my taillights, because the moment I parked, I saw those headlights rip into the neighborhood. Instantly, again, and instinctually, upon seeing the headlights of the car, I jumped out of mine and sprinted for behind the pool area. Behind the pool area was heavily wooded, and was a fairly steep drop-off for like 100 yards before you reach a ravine at the bottom. I bombed this as fast as humanly possible, without a single worry about the consequences of sprinting straight into the thickest brush imaginable. By the time I hit the bottom of the ravine, I could hear them enter the same woods that I had just dove into. A new wave of fear hit at this point. A fear I didn't know exists. A fear so strong I felt like I was no longer in control of my own body, just completely being guided by my dead ancestors in a last-ditch effort for survival. I, by the grace of God, discovered a small drain pipe that ran through the hillside nearest to the pool area, just barely enough to fit inside. Without a single thought of what may be inside of that drain pipe, I threw myself inside and crawled as deep into it as I possibly could. Just for some added horror to my night, the drain pipe was riddled with spiders, my biggest fear, next to being killed. While suffering inside of the drain pipe, I eventually heard the pursuers in the far distance talking. It was too far to pinpoint exactly what they were saying, but they were clearly very angry. There had to be at least 2 or 3 distinct voices I heard, and they were clearly much older than I was. Eventually the voices disappeared, but I was still too stricken with fear to move. My phone also had no signal deep inside of a drain pipe, so I just had to wait it out. I did not come out of that drain pipe until I could see the sunlight. When I did come out, I realized I had been bitten several times by various spiders inside the drain. I was also covered in cuts and lashes from sprinting full speed through the unforgiving brush. On top of all of this, my car was destroyed. They had smashed every window out of my car and flattened all 4 of my tires. You could almost see the rage and the damage to my car. This was the least of my worries, though. All of the damage in the end seemed trivial at best, considering I made it out alive. I ended up selling my car immediately after repairing it, just so I couldn't be identified by these people. This was still to this day my only experience with fear at a primal level. I hope that none of you reading this ever have to go through a similar experience. Stay safe out there.